The professor walked in front of him, his gait somewhat stiff, like he was favoring one leg. Kenn's dad had told him Professor Duvall had gotten injured in combat, so maybe that was the cause of his uneven walk. As soon as they sat, Denali came hurrying toward them, flashing Kenn one of his sweet smiles. The White House server was pure sunshine, and Kenn was happy they were becoming friends. Denali was one of the few people he didn't feel awkward around, probably because they were close in age. "Can we have tea, please?" Kenn asked him, "and maybe some of Mrs. Morelli's cookies." Denali's smile widened. "She baked fresh chocolate chip cookies for you this morning." Kenn laughed. "I'd better eat them then before my dad smells them. He'll devour them all if he gets the chance." The Secret Service agents were complaining that someone told the president where Mrs. Morelli hides their stash of cookies. Apparently, he ate quite a few of them. Denali hooked his thumb over his shoulder at Seth, and Kenn giggled. Seth coughed loudly from his spot against the wall. "I'm pleading the fifth." "I'll be right back with tea and cookies," Denali said, looking amused, then rushed off. "Can he do that?" "Pleading the fifth?" Professor Duvall asked. Kenn turned his attention back to him. "Excuse me?" Can a Secret Service agent refuse to answer a question like that? I don't know. I guess it depends on who's asking the question." Professor Duvall leaned forward. "Let's say his supervisor asked him, or the director of the Secret Service. Could he refuse to answer?" Kenn thought quickly. The Fifth Amendment protected people from incriminating themselves, didn't it? If he was the one who told my father about the cookies, then yes, because answering would mean incriminating himself. But does that apply to an employer-employee relationship? Isn't the Fifth Amendment only applicable in a legal situation, say, a police interrogation or a court case? I wouldn't think so, because if he confessed to someone, including his supervisor, they could then be called as a witness and testify to what he had told them. So I think in no situation can you be forced to answer questions that would incriminate yourself. What if your father asked the question? What if the President of the United States demanded that Seth tell the truth? He'd have to answer then, wouldn't he? The President is the highest authority in the country, superseding even the Supreme Court. He's not. This Kenn was certain of. The President isn't above the law. That's why we have checks and balances, so that the judiciary branch can check the executive branch. If Seth refused to answer, the government could sue him, I think, but that case could take its course through the system, maybe even ending up at the Supreme Court, which would rule in his favor because of the Fifth Amendment. Professor Duvall sent him a broad smile. Well argued. In this case, there are a few things that make it more complicated, since Seth is a federal employee and thus bound by what's called a Calkin's warning that could make it mandatory for him to tell the truth, but we'll get into more detail about that later on. For now, let's talk about what draws you to studying the law. He'd prepared for this question. I want to make positive changes in our society through the law. My father does it through politics, but I think people underestimate how important laws are at every level. I want to make a difference by using the legal process. Denali showed up with their tea and cookies, and Professor Duvall nodded at him, waiting with his answer until Denali had walked off again. That's a lofty goal. In which areas would you like to make a difference? Social justice, first and foremost, which I don't know much about yet, but I've been trying to learn more about how laws favor white people. I still have a lot to learn and understand, but I know that inequality is built into our legal system and that the system helps perpetuate it. Professor Duvall's eyes lit up. I can see why your father thought me a good match. I'm passionate about social justice, and I'd love to teach you more about this if you feel we'd be a good fit. A good fit? What did he mean? I'm not sure I understand. My father already hired you. He did? But if you were to tell me you're not comfortable working with me for any reason, I'd walk away all the same. Not comfortable? Kenn had no idea what the man was referring to. What an odd phrase. Maybe it meant it in more general terms, as in that Kenn wouldn't like him? No objections on my end, Professor. I'm excited to learn from you. A flash of relief passed over the professor's face. I'm glad to hear it. Let's get started then. I made a first schedule of topics. Why don't we have a look at that, and you can tell me if anything is missing or if I've listed things you already know about.